too many buttons too fast. Give me a second. That one. All right. I got to let Facebook catch up. Go live on both Facebook and YouTube. All right. What's up, teammates? So welcome to another episode of Teammate Talks. I started too early. All right. What's up, teammates? And welcome to another episode of Teammate Talks. This time, we're actually going to be talking about courtesy. I know the title of the video says don't push it. You'll see where I'm getting with that because we're going to talk about a very specific aspect of courtesy as it relates to relationships, kids, and otherwise, right? Because we always like to talk about courtesy with our kids. I know almost every parent talks about courtesy. You talk about being nice to others, saying nice things, helping, using your manners, sharing, all of those things. And those are all great examples of using courtesy, right? But one of them that I don't think we talk about enough, and it's one of the ones I like to bring up in my young kids classes, is part of courtesy is also respecting other people's boundaries. As in, if someone else says no, if someone else says stop. Now, those aren't the best ways to set boundaries, but it is still a boundary. If someone is setting a boundary, it is really, really important that we use our courtesy to respect that boundary. Axel, can you grab me a phone charger? All right, thanks. So yeah, it's really important that we teach our kids that respecting boundaries is another part of courtesy, whether it's about respecting our boundaries or the way I taught my son was about his boundaries. So I talked to him if he was like, pushing boundaries, pushing lines, that's what kids do. But I would talk to him about, hey, how would you feel if I pushed one of your lines? If you told me to stop, if you told me not to do this anymore and I pushed, how would you feel, right? So it's not just about respecting boundaries. It's also about learning how to set boundaries because that's part of having courtesy for yourself, right? Courtesy for others, I'm going to respect any boundaries you set. Courtesy for yourself, I'm not going to be afraid to set a boundary for myself, right? Yeah. Now, setting boundaries at first, talking about really young kids, can be pretty simple, right? Using words like no, stop, enough, I don't want to do that anymore, things like that are perfectly acceptable ways to set boundaries when you're young. Now, as you get older, or as your kids get older, you've got to look at boundaries a little bit differently, right? So when we talk to teens and adults, we talk about setting boundaries like this. First, tell them what is accepted or what is not accepted in the situation. Second, give them the consequence if they don't respect that boundary, right? What the consequence will be. I'm not going to play with you no more. I'm not going to hang out with you no more. Whatever that concept's going to be, right? And then they have to follow through with those consequences. So if someone pushes that boundary too far, they have to follow through. Now, I've talked a lot about this, but where does this all start? Well, it starts when they're kids, and it starts with the parents, right? So parents usually do a pretty good job of setting boundaries for themselves early in childhood, right? Or early in their kids' childhood about what's acceptable, what's not, no means no, things like that. But where a lot of parents kind of fall off is allowing their kids, within reason, to practice setting boundaries for themselves. As in, when you're playing with a young child and they say, no, don't do that, you can, well, I'm going to respect your boundary. I won't do that. What can I do instead, right? And that lets your kids understand that they don't have to be a doormat. Because if we constantly talk about courtesy as be nice to others, do nice things for others, then kids start to think if I want to be courteous, then I have to be nice, even if someone else is being mean. Even if someone else is pushing my boundary, I just have to stand here and take it and be nice back. And that's not what it means at all. Part of courtesy is also courtesy for yourself, being nice to yourself. That means feeling comfortable in using your voice to set a boundary for yourself. We work with this in the 4 to 6 year olds and the 7 to 8 year olds on how to use their voice to set a boundary when they spar, when they do practice together.
This also includes body autonomy. Sorry, I've been losing my voice all week. So if you would expect your kid to ask you, can I have a hug, right? We should be doing the same thing. So if we force them to hug or kiss or this, that, and the other, then we're just teaching them that not only do their opinions not matter, but their bodies are not theirs and don't matter.
They don't have control to tell somebody that's not okay or that is okay. And that kind of stuff starts early,
But then
right?
when they go to school, if all of a sudden they kiss some other kid or hug some other kid and then they get in trouble, then we're like, well, why did you do that?
Yeah, well, they did it because everyone did it to them,
Yeah.
right? Everyone did it to them regardless of whether they wanted them to or liked it or not. And so they display that same behavior. So setting boundaries starts at home. It starts with you setting boundaries with your kids and making sure that they follow those boundaries. Now, when you set a boundary for your kid, it's just like setting a boundary with an adult, right? You don't just set the boundary, you tell them the consequences if they keep pushing the button. Now, we all do this with our kids. You know, I need you to stop doing that. If you don't stop doing that, I'm going to take that away. If you don't stop doing that, I'm going to do this, whatever it is. Like, we do that with our kids all the time. And that's great. It's a great example of setting a boundary with your kids and then enforcing the consequence of that boundary. But your kids are never going to get good at doing that unless they get to flip the script every once in a while, when it's reasonable and acceptable, right? So when it's reasonable and acceptable, they can, allow them to set boundaries with you. Like I said, within reason. Because don't let them walk all over you by, oh, I got to have my privacy. You're not allowed to see my phone. No. No. I got you that phone. You're still under my review. I'm going to check your phone, right? There's going to be certain things that you don't compromise on. But at the same time, you have to let them set boundaries for some things. For example, you got a 10, 11, 12-year-old that's frustrated or angry. This is a good chance to help them set boundaries by saying, hey, I understand emotionally you can't take what's going on right now. How about you tell me to leave you alone for a few minutes? I'll give you 10 minutes of time in your own room. That teaches them that it's okay to take space for themselves. It's okay to take time to process their emotions on their own. It's okay to set a boundary, right? And you can do that with young kids too. Because I was always like weird when I played with my son as a kid. Like I got really childlike, and sometimes I'd throw things or crash things together, and he wouldn't like it. He'd say, no, don't crash, no crash. He'd be 3 years old, no crash. Okay, yes, sir. And then I'm gonna stop doing that. So he understands that his boundaries about his stuff and his body are things that need to be respected. Right? And then if someone pushes that too far, then he has all of my permission to defend those boundaries and whatever means he has to defend those boundaries in that time, right? So a big part of this, like I say, I'm talking about courtesy. But being nice to others, part of being nice to others is respecting their boundaries. Part of being nice to yourself is being willing to use a stern voice and set a boundary for yourself. And this starts young, right? Because too often we get shy preteens and teenagers in here who are so scared to set a boundary for themselves, mostly because any other time they try to set a boundary for themselves, just got walked all over, and they didn't know how to follow through or give consequences for it or keep their space sacred, right? Like they didn't know how to do that because no one had ever taught them that it was okay for them to set a boundary. See, too many of us, we set the boundaries with our kids, but we don't give them the chance to set boundaries for themselves. So then they get into school and they don't know how to set boundaries for themselves. And then people are walking all over them, and they go home and talk about it. And you're like, well, just be nice, try to get along. So they try to be nice and they try to get along, and it leads to other kids just doing worse and worse and worse stuff to them, right? So yeah, I just want to answer that comment. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about courtesy, and we're talking about setting boundaries, right? So this is what I talk about in my 7 to 8 year old classes. Like we usually do this during sparring weeks, right? Courtesy week almost always lands on a sparring week. So for us, we talk about courtesy for others is respecting their boundaries. If someone says, hey, I'm new at this, I need to go slower, I need to go lighter, hey, I'm scared, then respect that boundary. Go slower, go lighter, teach them, help them get used to it. But if you go up to somebody and they say, hey, I don't want to go that light, can we go harder? And you both agree to it, okay. That's also setting a boundary and respecting a boundary with other people, right? And I'll make sure that every one of my kids, before they move up to the 9 to 12 class, understands not only how to set their own boundary, but how to respect other people's boundaries as well, right? And I feel like that's a really, really important part of life that we sometimes accidentally fall apart on as adults, because we tend to focus on our own our own boundaries, and forget to give our kids space to practice setting boundaries for themselves. As in, I'm playing with one of my kids' toys. He says, no, I don't want you to play with that. Instead of like, well, but no, just stop playing with it. He asked you to stop playing with it, stop playing with it. It's just an easy boundary to respect. Say, yeah, okay, I'll respect your boundary. If you don't want me to play with it, I won't play with it, right? This is an easy way to teach your kids how to respect boundaries. But you'd be surprised how many kids we have come in here north of 9 years old, right? Teenagers, even adults. Most of our adults struggle with this concept of setting boundaries because they're so used to doing what they're told. At work, they got to do what they're told. They're so used to bending over backwards for their clients, customers, friends, family, and otherwise, that they have long forgotten how to set a boundary for themselves. How to say, no, I can't cook dinner tonight, I'm sick. No, I'm not doing your laundry today, I don't feel good. No, I'm not doing this. You can do it yourself, right? And some adults have forgotten how to set those boundaries when they need them, right? And so it's something we have to talk to our adults about a lot. Like we'll see a couple adults sparring and someone will obviously be starting to get a little scared. And we stop and we say, do you feel a little anxious? Yeah, I'm nervous about getting hit. Okay, have you told them that? Have you set a boundary about, hey, this is the hardest I want to go right now because I'm new at this and I'm not used to it yet? And if you don't do that, then I'm not going to train with you anymore. I'm not going to spar with you anymore. That's how you set the boundary. And then if they break that boundary, you simply stop sparring with them. And you might grab an instructor and be like, look, I can't spar with this person anymore. Okay, you set your boundary. They didn't respect it. We'll respect it, and we'll put you in a better position, right? But you have to learn to advocate for yourself. This is such a huge problem with adults, especially women have such a difficult time advocating for themselves. I am all about women standing on their own independently and communicating their needs, communicating their boundaries, communicating, right? This is like a big thing for me because I love this as a man, because as a man, if a woman is very clear and upfront to communicate needs, wants, and boundaries with me, I know exactly what to do, right? Now, this might be a little bit of my high anxiety or my ADHD, and I'm good at picking up social cues, but I can't read minds, you know what I mean? So like knowing exactly what's expected or how a person feels helps me understand what they need in the moment and how to treat them in that moment and what I can do for them in that moment. But if they don't do that, then I don't know what to do. I'm lost, right? And I think the thing is when you talk about men, and this goes bad with men too, but for the vast majority of men, most of us got really comfortable setting boundaries with each other by the end of high school, right? Dude, if you don't stop doing that, I'll punch you right in the nose, right? Like that was common banter among men. Man, you say that again, you say something about my mom again, I'm gonna whoop your butt, right? Like these were types of boundaries that were set, and then if they kept going, fights happen, things like that. And I'm not condoning that. I'm just saying as men, we tend to pick on each other a lot, which pushes us to eventually put our foot down and learn how to set boundaries. But for a lot of women, they're still to this day kind of told, oh, get along, oh, do this, do that. I'm sure you can speak more on that. And it becomes a problem because they can't set those boundaries for themselves. Did you have something you wanted to add? You had that
I was just, there's a couple things I'm pinning, but I don't know how many times as a kid I was told you need to be seen and not heard.
I got told the same thing, yeah.
And there's a lot of people I don't get along with because I don't do the be seen and not heard thing well. I don't.
Well, and I get that it sometimes causes arguments between us, but I'd prefer to have the argument and know where she stands than to just not know and let resentment build, right? I would rather us just have to hash something out than to have it sit and become a problem.
But he also knows that I'm super independent, and so like if I just have to do something, I'm just going to do it. Even if it makes me mad, I'm going to do it angry, and then I'll be fine. I'm done, and I'm not worried about it anymore because it got done.
But then when I do that, you get mad at me.
I do.
I do. That's okay. I mean, our fights are pretty tame in all reality. No, I did the laundry. No, I did the laundry. But I said I was going to do it. Yeah, right. So anyway.
But also, with all of this boundary setting in mind, it's important for us adults to understand the difference between a rule and a boundary.
Yeah.
So when a boundary is set, that means that I say, I don't want you talking to me that way. If you do, if you continue to do that, I'm going to walk away.
Yeah.
I don't like you playing that way. If that keeps happening, I'm done playing.
Yeah.
That means that the consequence is now levied on me as the person who doesn't like what's going on.
Right.
Right? I take the consequence into my own hands. But with a rule, it would be, if you keep crashing my toys together like that, I'm smacking you in the face. That's a rule because the punishment now goes, or the consequences now go to the offending person.
Right. And that's not, I don't like the punch in the face idea, concept, but I see what you're getting at. I do.
I'm going to throw your toys away.
Right.
Well, now, that.
And that kind of rule setting goes a little bit too far, but like way I always say it is rules apply to everyone. Boundaries apply to who I'm talking to. If I say, no, I don't want you to hug me, that's a boundary. If I go into a class and I say, guys, I don't want any of you to touch me. If you do, it's going to be 10 push-ups. That's a rule. Does that make sense? When it applies to everybody versus when it applies to one. And there's no harm in setting boundaries with individuals, right?
Yes.
That don't have to be rule-based, if that makes sense. That's what I was trying to say.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's good stuff. So go ahead. I know you have
that's
more.
all I was going to say. I was pinning the rules thing.
I was saying, you had said something earlier that kind of reminded me of something, but that's it, right? And us adults, but particularly women, I'm not trying to sound sexist here, but particularly women and some men could really use some help learning how to set boundaries. And it's not that they don't know how to set the boundary, it's that they're not confident enough in themselves to assert themselves enough to set the boundary or to assert a consequence if that boundary is not respected, right?
Yeah.
But that's when you have to make sure that you're careful. You're not making threats. You're giving a consequence. You're careful to make sure that the consequence is something you have no problem following through with.
And I think the big problem is that so many of us are so worried about making other people happy.
Yeah.
Like, as a woman, I feel like in a large part of my childhood, I was raised to make sure that I made everyone else happy.
Can I pause you there for a second?
Yeah.
I just need everybody to understand this. Any relationship you're in, child, adult, parent to parent, friends, spouses, I don't care. Your job is not to make anybody happy. Your job is to love that person regardless of how they feel. Maybe even regardless of how they're acting. But your job is not to make them happy. I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah. So I had to get good grades to make my parents happy. I had to get my chores done to make my parents happy. I had to be quiet to make my parents happy and not inconvenience them, right? Those kind of things. I had to make my friends happy so that they would still want to be my friend, right? But in the end, like, as an adult, I'm 38 now. Like, I realize it's not my job to make anyone happy.
Right, but what about the things that make you happy?
Yeah. No,
that all gets put on the back burner.
it does. And so how this relates to courtesy is, and I talked about this all week long in every class, your courtesy is not for others.
No.
Your courtesy is you, and it's an integral part of you and something that should make you happy. I'm nice to everybody because I want to be nice to others, not because I want them to like me because I'm nice to them.
Right.
That doesn't mean they have to be nice to me. It doesn't mean they have to like me. It doesn't mean they have to do anything with me.
Okay, yeah. Now, and I'm going to pause to extrapolate on what she's saying, because this is something I talk about at Integrity Weeks. You can't control what someone else does or says, but you can control what you do or say in response to it, or in relation to it, or whatever else. So what I always tell my older kids is this. Someone says something real nasty to you. Someone says something real mean to you. Anytime that happens, I want you to imagine that you have 20 of your peers watching. They say something mean. Think about those 20 peers watching. What do they think about that person in that moment for saying that? Then ask yourself, what do you want those other 20 people to view you as? So if this guy says something nasty, and everybody might laugh, but other people might be like, man, he's a real jerk. I'm obviously, the words would be worse, but live, so I'm being nice, right? That person's a jerk. Then if I come back even harder, man, that guy's a jerk too. So if this escalates into a fight, everybody's just cheering it on because no one cares who wins or loses because they both look like a couple of donkeys, right? So I tell my kids, think about it this way. Someone says something nasty to you, 20 of your peers hear it. They might laugh or otherwise, but a lot of them are sitting there thinking, what a mean thing to say. That guy's such a jerk. So if I turn around and I respond by setting a stern boundary or saying something nice or using my courtesy, I'm not doing it to be nice to them. I'm doing it so that the other people see who I want them to see of me. If I want people to think that I'm a nice, compassionate person who will still stand my ground, then I have to stand my ground in a nice and compassionate way. And I know that sounds weird to a lot of you guys out there, but you can be stern, set a boundary, and stand your ground without being insulting, without being mean. You can absolutely do that. You can say, man, don't say that to me again. Don't ever say anything like that about me or my family again. Please, or you don't have to say please. You got me off track there. Say, hey, don't say anything like that to me again, or we're going to start having problems. I got no issue with you right now. We can just be nice and cordial and wave at each other and everything's cool. But if you keep this up, me and you are going to start to have bigger problems, right? Now, I'm kind of being nice, but I'm also setting my ground. I didn't insult that person. I didn't make fun of them. I simply set a boundary. Right? So what I say is when you respond, it's not about responding to the person you're talking to. It's about responding for everybody that can hear. And do you want them to see you as just as much of a donkey as that other person? Or do you want them to see you as someone who will stand their ground but is still nice and compassionate and reasonable?
And how are you going to feel at the end of the day?
How are you going to feel about how you handle it?
Because when you respond in anger, so if someone puts anger to you, and you respond in anger, you have completely wrecked your entire nervous system, made yourself feel bad.
So if someone's angry at me, my goal should not be to respond back in anger. My goal should be to stay relaxed. Let them hold their anger. Don't take that anger on. Hold back, stay relaxed. Until something gets physical, if it escalates or whatever, then you do what you got to do, right? But if she's angry and yelling and being mean, most people have this innate tendency to copy the energy given to them. So it's really easy when someone else is getting angry with me or yelling at me or making fun of me to turn around and do the same thing back, because revenge and eye for an eye and all that.
Match that energy.
Problem is, then everybody thinks of you the same way they think of that person. And that's probably not really what you want. I practice this every time I answer a troll comment on social media, right? I practice this every time. I remind myself, I'm not answering them. I'm talking to anyone else who might come across this comment later, who might want to see how I responded to it. And that's who I'm talking to with my response. And I want them to see me as a reasonable, mature adult who will set a hardline standard without being mean or insulting or derogatory. I want to be seen as someone who can show compassion and kindness, but not get walked all over at the same time. And I try to convey that every time that I'm talking. Like she said, when you're showing this kind of courtesy and compassion, it's not necessarily meant for the person you're talking to if they're being a jerk. It's meant for everyone around you, because you know the type of person you want to be seen as. So you act that way, even in the face of anger, frustration, meanness, whatever. You're going to act that way because you want to be seen as a person with integrity. You want to be seen as a person that's true to yourself. So if you believe compassion is important, then even if someone's in your face yelling mean stuff, you're still going to set a stern, hard line, but from a place of compassion. Hey man, I know you're only giving me a hard time because you had a rough day, and I understand that, but I need you to stop talking to me like that and step on back a little bit, or whatever, right? So that's the part of setting a boundary with compassion. Just, hey, I understand maybe you had a bad day. Maybe your mama yelled at you this morning or something, but that ain't no reason to be yelling at me like that. And that ain't no reason to be talking to me like that, right? You're going to have to please stop talking to me like that, because if you don't, then I'm going to walk away. And if this keeps happening, you're not going to like the consequences. I'm only saying not going to like because you can use insert consequence here, right? Like, everybody's going to have to find their own version of that sort of thing. I can't give you the answer that's going to work for you in every situation, right? You got to figure that out on your own. But this all starts with one thing we haven't talked about yet: confidence. It starts with confidence and self-esteem. A confident child has no problem setting boundaries. A confident child has no problem getting stern with somebody who is encroaching on them or stepping on them or walking all over them like a doormat. But a person might want to set I was this kid. I wanted to set those boundaries. I wanted to fight back. But I was so small and I was so scared of everybody else, and everybody else was so physical and all these other things, that I was too scared to set a boundary. So bad stuff would happen to me at school, and I would go home and just daydream and dream about, well, what if I had the bravery to stand up to them? What if I this? What if I that? And it wasn't until I got put in a martial arts class at around 9.5 for the first time. And it wasn't an overnight thing. It took about a year. And after a year, the anger started getting to me, and I finally started setting stern, hard lines. Someone come up, punch me in the back of the head. I stand up and look at him. Dude, I'm serious. If you touch me like that again, we're going to have serious problems. If you're lucky, I might just go tell the teacher. If you're not lucky, you ain't going to like what happens, right? And then, whatever. Next time that kid hit me in the head, this is a true story. Next time that kid hit me in the head, I turned around, slowly stood up, just inched my chest up closer to them. I was way smaller than them, and it was funny because they saw the look in my eye, and they actually backed down a little bit. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to be nice, and I'm just going to go tell the bus driver. And I went up and told the bus driver all that. Now, he told me, well, if it happens again, take care of it. And, of course, this was a different time, right? This was the early 90s. So the next time the kid did it, it was a couple weeks before he worked up the nerve to do it again. The next time the kid walked by and slapped me in the back of the head, they were walking past me, I stood up and grabbed both their feet and lifted them up and made them face plant on the ground. And I got on top of them, and I didn't hit them or anything. I just got on top of them, got them in a choke, stood there and said, apologize or I ain't letting go. Apologize or I ain't letting go. And it took them a minute or two to apologize. And then, everybody was kind of laughing. But after that, that dude not only showed me respect, he ended up becoming one of my closer friends a couple years later. This was Caleb. You know Caleb. Yeah, and we actually ended up kind of getting along once he learned that I was going to set a boundary that he needed to learn how to respect, right? And that's the thing. You have to be willing to take a stand, but only confident people are willing to take a stand. So first, you have to make sure you're raising a child who is confident and speaking up for themselves. Is that sometimes frustrating as a parent? Absolutely, because it means you're raising a child who's allowed to argue a little bit. You're raising a child who's allowed to make points or debate back with you if you're wrong about something. And you have to be adult enough and mature enough to admit when they have a point. So, oh, go to your room because you did this. But you said the rule was this and I did this. Okay, you have a point and it makes sense and you have a valid argument. However, it still breaks the spirit of the rule and you're still going to your room, right? Whatever it is, right? So you have to be, or if you're completely wrong, okay, I misjudged the situation. I got on to Axel a handful of times when he was getting lots of times. I'd get on to him about something I half seen out of the corner of my eye, and I'd be like, don't you do that? This isn't a good thing to do. And he'd go, but that's not what I was doing. This is what I was doing. Oh crap, I just saw the end of it. I didn't see the whole thing, didn't realize that this was an okay thing. I'm sorry, son, I shouldn't have got onto you. I jumped at the wrong time. I remember one time getting onto him because him and a friend were like argue fighting. He was like 5 or 6. Him and his friend were like argue fighting and they're looking mad at each other and they're blah, 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 blah. And I caught it out of the corner of my eye. I was like, you two stop it. You'll be yelling mean things at each other. And they were both like, well, but we weren't. And I was like, I saw you. We were just playing. We were acting out two people fighting.
Like WWE.
Oh, my bad. Yeah, they were acting out some WWE stuff. So I was like, oh, my bad. All right, that's my fault. Y'all were just playing. I didn't realize. I thought y'all looked so serious about it, you know? But you have to raise kids who are okay to stand up for themselves, who are okay to set a boundary, who are okay to use a stern voice. And this is not something that most kids come by naturally. A lot do. But most kids need to be taught this. They need to know it's okay to speak up. They need to know it's okay to say no in a stern voice. Like, because how many parents, think about this. Let's be honest with yourselves, parents out there. How many times do you say no to your kid as they're growing up? Now, did your kid ever do it back to you? And how did you respond? That's the key. How did you respond? You don't get to tell me no. I set the rules in this house. You don't get to probably something along those lines, right? That only reinforces to your child that they're not allowed to sternly set a boundary. Then you send that child to elementary school. And they're afraid to say no in a stern voice. They're afraid to say stop it. Because every time they said it to you, the only person they'd interacted with up to that point on any regular basis, it made things worse. So now they think, if I go to school and tell this other kid no or stop it, it's going to make the situation worse, just like it does when I try to do that with mom or dad, right? Now, you can